Good evening and welcome to the regular council meeting for Wednesday, May 6th, 2026. We might have a little bit of feedback here, but I'm going to continue as they work to fix that. We respectfully acknowledge that the land on which we gather and work is on the unceded traditional territory of the Comox First Nation, the traditional keepers of this land. Our first item is we will be moving into a public hearing for zoning amendment bylaw number 2056.02. So I will move that the regular council meeting recess until after the public hearing on zoning amendment number 2056.02. Can we check our council mics, please? Okay, we're going to get back to that. I will repeat that first portion there, that the regular council meeting will recess at 5:02 p.m. until after the public hearing on zoning amendment bylaw number 2056.02 for 1301 Knight Road. If I can get a seconder. And all those in favor? Perfect. Thank you very much. So I will now welcome everyone to the public hearing meeting on Wednesday, May 6th, 2026. This is to discuss the zoning amendment bylaw at 1301 Knight Road. This public hearing is hereby convened pursuant to Section 464 of the Local Government Act for the purpose of hearing representations from those who believe that their interest is affected by this proposal. I'm just going to read off a couple of paragraphs for this zoning amendment. The proposed bylaw has received first and second readings, but has not passed third reading or been adopted by council. At this public hearing, everyone who believes that their interest in property is affected by the proposed bylaw will be given a reasonable opportunity to be heard or to present written submissions. To maintain order and to ensure everyone speaking has a reasonable opportunity to be heard, I ask that each person wishing to speak first add their full name and address to the speakers list located at the desk in front of the gallery. All speakers will be asked to speak by the chair, and once called upon, please begin your presentation by clearly stating your name and your address. Please limit your presentation to 5 minutes. After all have had an opportunity to be heard, anyone wishing to have further input may once again sign the speakers list. Council will not debate with each other or members of the public. Council will not answer questions as we are here to hear from you on this bylaw. Technical questions may be directed to staff. Everyone will be given a reasonable opportunity to be heard at this meeting. No one will be or should feel discouraged or prevented from making his or her views heard. Please refrain from any conduct that would intimidate others or discourage anyone from speaking. In addition, you may wish to provide a written submission during the public hearing. You may do so by leaving a copy at the desk of the clerk. And please note that written submissions must be received by the end of the public hearing and must include your full name and address and must be read out by the person making the submission or a member of staff in order to be considered. So the application summary for zoning amendment bylaw number 2056.02. In general terms, zoning amendment bylaw number 2056.02 is proposing to amend the zoning of subject property from E3 light industrial to a new comprehensive development CD zone to facilitate a new gravel, compost, and soils business relocated from across Knight Road at 1200 Military Row. Public hearing submissions may either be written or verbal. To ensure that a summary of your written submission is included in the minutes of the meeting, please ensure that all are read out or submitted to the desk of the clerk before the calling of the end of the meeting. This proposed bylaw is now open for discussion, and we will just look to see if there is any speakers on the speakers list. Yes, please just sign your name and address there. Thank you. Thank you very much. So I'll just get you to go to the mic so those online can hear. And you just need to press the button until it goes red. And start by stating your full name and your address. Welcome, and you will have 5 minutes, Elaine. Thank you.
Okay. Hi. My name is Elaine Semenchuk, and I live at 1351 Knight Road. And I live next door to the proposed soil processing operation that is presently located beside the airport. Sorry. I am against seeing this move, but I am also realistic in my belief that this will most likely get approved. Before it's approved, I do have some points that I feel need to be raised. In looking at some of the maps that I have been provided over the years from the town of Comox, I see this area is deemed not developable. Is the town changing their stance on this property? If so, does this also include my property? I would ask that the town of Comox make it mandatory that a high commercial concrete fence be constructed along the Vancouver Island Enterprises property line. This will mitigate sound, some dust, rodents, as well as providing protection from fire hazard and any water runoff courses that will eventually, inevitably happen and run into the streams along the property boundary. Water courses have always been protected within the scope of any project approval. And I expect that the same level of care be taken with this project. Why does this property have to be designated comprehensive development, commonly known as heavy industrial? Heavy industrial comes with almost no restrictions for activities, materials allowed to be used on site, and hours of operation. It presently operates on airport industrial zoning that offers some protection for those around the property. And I don't see why I, as a neighbor, should be signing off on any restrictions on operations that will happen next door. I believe there should be some protections for neighboring properties that aren't in place with heavy industrial zoning. The implications of having my home and property bordering on heavy industrial zoning will have a negative impact on my daily life here, as well as depreciating my property values. Thank you.
Thanks, Elaine. I'll just call if there's any other folks that would like to add their names to the speakers list. We will just give it a minute here to see if there are any other speakers. And a reminder, written submissions do need to be in by the end of the hearing. I will remind those present that legal considerations do prevent members of council from considering any representation after the end of the public hearing. So before closing the public hearing, I will call 3 times for any other further speakers or written submissions. For the first time, is there anyone who wishes to make any representation? For a second time, is there anyone who wishes to make any representation? And for a third time, is there anyone who wishes to make any further representation? Okay, so therefore, being with no further speakers or written submissions, we do declare this public hearing closed at 5:12. I'll just get them. Actually, we're not adjourning. We're going back into our regular meeting here. Thank you. So we have no introduction or approval of late items this evening. If I can get a motion to adopt the agenda for May 6th. Any discussion on the agenda this evening? All those in favor? Opposed? And that passes unanimously. Thank you. We have 2 delegations this evening. Our first delegation will be with Graham Roberts from NMP LLP to go over the Town of Comox 2025 audited financial statements and a presentation. So welcome to Graham. And you may have some
Thank you, Mayor and
questions.
Council.
You may have questions after.
Let's work the slides here. Okay, so down arrow. Okay, there we go. Okay, just quickly I'll go over some financial highlights, talk about our draft audit report, audit findings, and our independence. So, oops, went the wrong way. Sorry about that. So these are consolidated financial statements that staff has prepared. They are consolidated because they bring in all the funds together: the general fund, water fund, sewer fund, capital funds, and reserve funds. So they're called consolidated financial statements. Now the exciting stuff. So total revenue, the first column is the 2025 actual, middle column is 2024 comparative, and the far right column is the 25 budget. So total revenues just under $48 million. So significant increase from last year and from budget. Total expenses of $32 million, increase of $2 million from last year, but less than budget. So annual surplus. So let's let me phrase that as an accounting surplus of $15.7 million in the current year. Thing why I'm saying it's accounting purposes, certain things get brought into revenue that don't have any expenses against them. That would be capital purchases. So if you have a capital grant, which you had a little bit this year, that full amount of that revenue gets brought into revenue and no expense gets showed up. The expense would be amortization as that asset is depreciated. And the current year, about $8.8 million of developer contributions was brought into revenue during the year, which there's no corresponding expense against them. So that's why you have such a large surplus. Okay, so now this is a statement of cash flows. So this is sort of more in line to how you do your budget. Budget's done on a more on the cash basis than an accrual basis. You can see operations. So that's your revenue plus your changes in your working capital, your accounts receivable, accounts payable, and so forth, brought in $22 million. Capital purchases of just under $15 million. And if you look at the actual financial statements, you'll see that the total asset additions is greater than that, because about 2.9 of contributed assets for the sewer conveyancing project was brought on, which you didn't pay for. So it's a contributed asset. So again, that's another reason why the revenue is up. Transfers to investments, so putting money to earn better interest, moved 2.4 million there. The scheduled debt repayments of 530 and new borrowing of 1.1. So net positive cash inflow of $4.3 million. So statement of financial position. So this is a snapshot of what the balances were at December 31st. So lumping cash and investments together, you can see $63.5 million of cash and investments. So a nice increase from the previous year of 55.6 million. Total financial assets, so it's including your accounts receivable amounts is 69 million. So increase from the prior year of 60. Total debt, equipment financing is 3.6 million, increase from last year because we had some new borrowing plus the scheduled repayments. Total liabilities increased to 2.6. So that's just timing on certain things and your payables. Total net financial assets, so that's your financial assets minus your financial liabilities. These a good position of $42 million, increase from 39 from the previous year. Non-financial assets, so the main piece of that is tangible capital assets. So that balance has increased to almost 119. So about $17 million of additions during the current year. Less amortization of 4 million. And the bottom is the accumulated surplus. So you can see that's increased to almost $162 million from almost 146. So that's from your surplus. And we'll break that down a little further to what makes up the surplus. So your operating funds had surplus of $17 million. So it's a nice increase from the previous year of 13.3. Capital funds, that's what you're invested in your capitals. It's an increase to 115. Reserves are down slightly, pretty consistent the prior year, down 400,000. And so those amounts there, you add up to accumulate operating surplus of $161 million. Then you also have on your statements is the statement of remeasurement gains or losses. So this is where we're fair valuing some of your investments. That's the accumulated unrealized gains in those investments of $553,000. So if you add the 161 and the 552, that comes up with your total accumulated surplus. Okay, so our draft audit report, so it's unqualified opinion, so it's in all material respects. I'll talk about materiality in a bit. The statement's presented fairly. Why is it draft? It's draft until the council approves the financial statements, and then after the council's approved the financial statements, we will be able to release our audit report. Completion of minor outstanding items, those have all been completed now. When we drafted this, we had a legal confirmation still outstanding, and so some other little things and all that we're all accounted for now. So talking about our audit findings, so we examined the controls that are in place. We don't do control testing per se, but we examine the controls and make sure we have a good understanding of the controls. We sample transactions throughout the year. When we bring in materiality, we sample every transaction above that amount, and we sample transactions below that amount based on the risk factors that we determine to be with that population. So again, we don't look at every transaction. We did not find any irregularities, the material impact the statements, no evidence of conflict of interest, unusual related party transactions, or the unusual or questionable payments. So I'd also like to acknowledge staff. We are hopefully not too intrusive, but we do ask lots of questions, and the work. We also want to acknowledge the work that they put together, putting the information together for us to be able to do our audit. And so we confirm that we're independent. So to be independent audit opinion, we need to be independent. So we're just confirming. These are professional codes of conduct. We are independent as of today's date. So that's my quick presentation. Is there any questions?
Thanks, Graham. Sorry, we have the wrong name on there, but
Yeah.
thank you to Graham.
Yeah.
Just look around the table for any council questions for Graham on the audit. Just a quick question. I'm not sure if it's going to micro or not. With our planned revenue of 37 million and then the actual being 47 million, was that based on some grant funding that came in, or is there like a one or two kind of item explanations for that $10 million difference between budget and actual?
A big part will be the deferred contributions, whether it's deferred capital contributions, that would be a big part of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's not really.
There's no big grants this year, unfortunately.
Okay. Thank you for that. I'll just look for other questions for council for Graham. Okay, thank you so much for coming for the audit presentation, and we'll be getting to that later. You're welcome to stick around or depart. Thank you. Councillor Blacklock, do you mind grabbing that mic for me? Thank you. Okay, our next delegation is from Chief Gord Schreiner to give us a presentation on the fire station progress update. So welcome, Chief Schreiner, and I'll get you to turn the mic on there so we can have you live.
Right, I should know that. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to give you an update of the fire hall construction. And welcome to all the guests. Many of you guys know tonight. I know you're all here to hear about the fire hall. So fire hall project's been going on for several years now in the planning stage. You know, many years ago, we looked at the need for a fire hall, and now we're moving quickly into it. So the construction has begun. This is just a very short presentation tonight, give you an update, and the picture you see here is our staff in our new temporary office, which is 400 square feet. So 400 square feet is probably a little bit smaller than this room, and we have the 9 folks working in there. The new fire hall will be quite a bit bigger. Just to give you some reminders, this is part of a presentation I did probably a year ago to you, but we've had 3 fire stations in the 84-year history of the fire department. First one lasted for 16 years at Gladstone and Fairburn. Second one was 20 years just across the street on Gladstone, and the current one is 48 years on Knoll Avenue. This is a drawing of what the new upgrade will look like. To remind council, what we're planning on doing here is keeping the truck bays in place that are 48 years old and replacing the office section, which is primarily a 1-story building now into a 3-story building. The truck bays were assessed a year or so ago to see about their worth and whether it was desirable to take them down or keep them. We've decided to keep them. We expect they can last for another 40 years. They were seismically upgraded in the 90s. The new office structure will be seismically upgraded. The current one is not. We currently have our largest truck fits in the fire station there. We have no major truck bay reconfigurations. We are targeting a few small projects on the truck bays during this build, a new roof, fire sprinklers in the truck bays, and maybe matching the siding with the new building and paint and some concrete work. That all ties in very nicely with the construction we're doing. Highlights on our new program for the new building, as I mentioned, 3-story. So we're going from about 4,000 square feet to about 10,000 square feet. No major trees will be removed. There was a couple very small cedar hedge that had to come out. We're going from 3 offices to 7 offices. We're going from 1 shower in the building for 60 people to 9 showers. And we're going to 13 bathrooms from our 2 bathrooms. Our training space will have 1 large classroom on the main floor and 2 smaller classrooms on the second floor, which is really important to us. On the second floor in those classrooms, one of the boardrooms or classrooms will be broke down into 4 workstations. So paid on call firefighters, volunteer firefighters that typically work at home will be able to work at the fire station if they want to use photocopiers and kind of act as a business center that makes them available to respond to calls quickly. So we're going to add 5 suites on the top floor of this new construction for younger volunteer firefighters, affordable rent and so on. The new station will be post-disaster ready, so it'll be suitable for the town's COC, Emergency Operations Center. Again, it'll have sprinklers, it'll be earthquake upgraded, it'll have a generator for full power. We're going to have an expanded kitchen, classroom storage, as I mentioned. It'll be university accessible. We'll have an elevator in the building, accessible washrooms, and so on. And there'll be a huge improvement on the health and safety for our firefighters. As I mentioned, we'll have more showers. We're going to have a decontamination area. So when firefighters come back in from a fire full of soot and dirt and stuff, they'll have an area to clean, including laundry services, which we don't have in the building now. This should help improve their health and safety. And we'll also have a wellness component, so fitness center and things like that in the building. One of the key benefits I mentioned is the bedrooms. These bedrooms will be suitable for our WEB program, which stands for Work Experience Program. So over the last 15 years, we typically will have one work experience firefighter in the building who works there for free just to gain experience with us. So great value for us. In the new format, we may have one or two, depends on how many other suites are needed for local firefighters. These will be affordable units. These affordable units, the affordability will be in exchange for their on duty participation. So they'll be on duty at night, giving us a faster nighttime response. Right now, there's nobody in the fire station in the evenings, so it makes for a longer time response. And it'll strengthen our paid on call model, and the building is be designed for full-time staffing in the future if it ever requires in the next 20, 30, 40 years. A little bit about the money. Borrowing of up to $7 million, the money or the cost will be shared between the town of Comox and our fire protection partner, the Comox Fire Protection Area. That $7 million includes a $1 million contingency fund in there. We'll receive about $50,000 in rental income from those suites upstairs. Council has approved $100,000 from the affordability fund. At a recent meeting, I asked council to advance $300,000 from the 2027 budget to tie in with this project. We'll discuss that on the next slide. The Comox Firefighter Association will be donating $50,000 for furnishing on the third floor. And part of this project will be a DCC, which means we can recover about 20% of the overall cost of this from future developments and so on. Further, we may receive wildfire revenue as we've done in the past, and we can turn some of that into paying some of the debt down on this project. Wildfire revenue is, I'll remind council, the Comox Fire Department's taken in almost $2 million in the last 20 years working for the province in the summertime going to wildfires. We did a couple last year and took in $200,000 or $300,000, I believe. And as we're all anxiously awaiting, we have applied for a $5 million federal grant, and we expect to hear from that in the next 60 days or so. So, of course, if that grant comes through, things will look pretty rosy here. So more on the project funding. These are resolutions council passed in a January meeting. The council approved a loan up to $7 million. That was carried. That the construction of the fire station replacement be authorized if the cost estimates were less than the 6.1 million, and the total expenditure of 7 million. To date, April 30th, a week ago, our estimate came in at 5.7, and we're spending an additional $200,000 in preparation for that construction to happen. So we're at about 5.9. The preparation costs are many: temporary office, relocating fiber optics, relocating Wi-Fi, building insurance, and a few other costs like that. The council approved $100,000 from Affordable Housing Fund. And again, council has authorized a movement of $300,000 forward from our 2027 capital budget, which quite frankly might not get spent till 2027 anyhow. But this will tie together the sprinkler system that we're putting in the new building. So we're going to put sprinklers in the truck bays at the same time, which will reduce the overall cost of that project. We're going to replace the roof on the truck bays at the same time as we're adding the new roof to the new structure. And we're going to add replace concrete in the existing truck bay area and tie that with the concrete for the other projects. So all these things are going to save us some money, and I think it will allow us to tie in some other parts to the project, like matching the siding on both buildings and aesthetically making it much better. That's a picture of our coffee room right now. So we're having coffee and luncheon behind the trucks. We've got a portable kitchen there. We have a portable sink with a sump pump that pumps water into a 45-gallon drum that we have to dispose of, and we're using outhouses for the next year. So, project is supposed to be completed the fall of 2027. So right now, as we speak today, we have hazardous material removal of the building. The building has lots of asbestos and other great products in there that are all getting removed right now. Demolition of the building will happen about 15th to 31st of this month. Means the whole building will be torn down. It's going to be what we call a soft demolition to start with. So they're going to go in there and take out valuable lumber, so bigger pieces of lumber that can be reused, repurposed, and stuff like that. At the end, there'll be a lot of crunching of the smaller stuff. New construction will start in about June, and again, the completion in the fall. I thought I had a couple other slides, but they didn't come through in here. But I would encourage you to come up and visit and see our new office. It's quite interesting. And we've done a lot of this work ourselves. We built the kitchen ourselves. We ran a lot of the IT stuff ourselves. And I know our local IT guy has been pretty impressed with what we've been able to accomplish up there. So happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Chief Schreiner, and thank you for the level of detail for the update to the public, especially with the soft demolition coming. And I just want to say the blend of using the truck bays as well as the modernization of the really workable space is very impressive. So thank you for the update tonight. I'll just look around the table. Councillor Haslett, and then Councillor Blacklock with a question.
Thanks very much, Chief. Just a couple of quick questions for you. Did it make sense to move the offices across the street to the rec center to maybe be able to help out with a little bit of the space, or is
I think it's important that the offices stay at the fire hall because that's our meeting place, and calls happen all day long and every day. And we have been volunteers coming in to meet with us for training or rate tests and things like that, and the general public. We are using the rec center, and thank you to the rec director. We use that building on Tuesday nights at the classroom, so we're using a portion of that. We're also going to use the rec center and public works for showers when we need them, because we're not going to have a shower in that building for quite a while. So
perfect. And then just one more question, and this might go along, but we do take out like course construction insurance in the event there's a fire and everything burns down.
we've already done so. Yeah, we've got construction insurance, which is a significant cost. So yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. And by the way, we did get a discount because we're very close to the fire hall. It was comical answering the questionnaire that they sent out, like how close are you to the fire hall? Well, we are the fire hall, right? And how, and we got firefighters there during the daytime, 7 days a week. So
Glad they honored that discount. We'll go to Councillor Blacklock with a
Yeah,
question.
Chief, just a question on the contract itself. Who is the general contractor for the project?
the general contractor through a competitive bid through BC Bid was Lacasse Construction, local contractor. So he's our general contractor. He is doing all the subcontracts. He's getting the 3 best prices, so to speak, for each of the 20-something trades we're dealing with. He brings them to me and he sits down with recommendations, and then we cooperatively choose who's doing the next step sort of thing. So,
And were you privy to how many total bids were received on the project?
yes, we had 13 bids.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Thank you.
And then the same with the architect before that. I think we had 17 architectural bids a year ago, and that was a local company also. So,
Thank you. We'll go to Councillor Grant.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Gord. You guys do a lot of work on that, and I know you've always done that at the fire hall, but if we were to build a brand new fire hall, just for perspective, what would we be looking at for dollars that way rather than the work that you guys are doing?
yeah, it's a great question. And, when we looked at this project over the last 2 or 3 years, we looked at all the different avenues. And one of them was a brand new station in a different location, which would be very convenient to just build a new station and move across the street or move down the road. We're probably looking in the neighborhood of 10 to 20,000 or $20 million to do the full meal deal. So we think this is the most economic. We like the location we're at. We think we're in a good location. We also have the training center tied into the back, which is a few $1 million worth of assets back there too. So the location's good. A bit of hardship doing the temporary office space, but it seems to make sense. And, so budget wise, I think we're as best we could be.
Thanks. We'll go back to Councillor Haslett.
Thanks. and this might not be for yourself as much as, say a wall, but would we get, when we signed on for the garbage contracts, were there areas that they fell short on and we were paying for services that hadn't been quite provided yet? And if so, are we able to get breaks on the tipping fees when there's the breakdown of the construction, and we can then leverage the, I guess, leverage the provider and say, we want you to take this stuff away for cheap or free because you haven't been able to provide everything you said you would under the contract?
So the tipping fees specifically are something we pay to the regional district. I think what you mean is the contract fees that we have that we're paying to the solid waste provider. I think that's a discussion that's probably better suited for in camera, because you're getting into penalties on to specific contracts. So I'm not sure this is the time to maybe have that conversation.
Pull that one offline. Okay, well, we have Chief Schreiner. Are there any further questions from council?
As I mentioned, there was a couple of slides missing, and it's probably my fault why that happened, but one of the slides indicated that we have given 3 loads of stuff to Habitat Restore. So things like countertops, cabinets, all kinds of stuff. You know, it's amazing how much stuff we had, some old appliances and stuff. So they've done well picking up, and they've been of good help to repurpose a lot of that stuff. So.
Excellent. Well, thank you for going the extra mile and providing again that level of detail. It's much appreciated. We know you have an open door with showing the public or
Yeah,
council.
My pleasure. Yeah.
Around.
Council anytime, and to the public, if you want to come up anytime, come and visit us.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And we have our fingers crossed on that grant, knowing we needed to do it anyway. Thank you. Great. That is our delegations for this evening. So we are on page 5 of the regular council meeting minutes for Wednesday, April 22nd, 2026 for adoption.
Moved. Second.
Any discussion on those meeting minutes? All those in favor? Opposed? And that passes unanimously. Thank you. Under council committee meeting minutes and reports, we have Nautical Days Committee meeting for March 31st for receipt.
Second.
Moved and seconded, and for discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? And that passes unanimously. Thank you. We are now on page 14 of the consent agenda. We have items 1 through 5. If we can take a motion to receive.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All favor in receipt of 1 through 5. So I'll just do that one more time. All those in favor of 1 through 5. Opposed, and that passes. And are there any items that council would like to remove for further discussion? Councillor Grant.
Yeah, could I pull out number 3?
Second.
That's been moved and seconded, and that's on the streetlight issue number 3. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to know, like this keeps coming up all the time, and I know Mr. Breschers had a hard time with this, and I think it's a bit of a unique situation. I'm just wondering if there's anything that council can do to help him out here. I know we've gone over this before, but I just wanted to refresh.
I'm going to send this over to staff just to give us a formal update on
Yeah.
the streetlight issue. There's this one individual, but there's been other letters also, so just to staff.
Yeah, maybe I could ask Director Ashfield to walk through the process that we've gone through on this specific light.
Yeah, thank you. This light was changed out in 2021. The street lights on Cook Avenue and most within the town are on hydro poles. And so specifically in this area, it is on a hydro pole. We had, when the complaint came in 2021, we had Hydro look at and do an analysis of what can be done. And the conclusion came back that they can't lower the light. There's so much infrastructure underneath that light that they can't lower it. That's what's causing a little bit more of the spread of the light in that area and on that street. There's actually 4 street lights on that Cook Avenue between Rodello and Aiken. And they can't tilt it or move the axis in any way, because then we're just going to be pushing the pollution onto another road or another street, another property. So that was communicated with the property owners. I believe the 2 complaints within the same across the street from each other in 2021. And Hydro does not put shields on their lighting. So that's not an option either.
Great follow-up, Councillor Grant.
Could we just remove that light? What if we just took it out? I mean, there's 4 lights on the street. I haven't been by there at night, so I don't know what impact that would have, but is that a possibility?
Council can direct us to do anything you like. On that street, like as I mentioned, we have 4 street lights. It's a residential road, so the lighting is at its minimum. The intention obviously that we want to do is to make sure that the roadway is safe for pedestrians, motorists, cyclists. So I caution removing it. Right now, the standard that we have is that a street light is on every second hydro pole. If we remove that street light, they're going to be maybe the 4th pole that you would see a street light. So there would be a dark area. And also like to remind council of the daylight savings that we have. So come September, when kids are going to school, they're going to be probably walking to school in the dark, and there's no sidewalk on Cook Avenue on that section of road as well. So to keep that in mind as well as you make your decision.
Thank you.
Thank you. So perhaps if people want to check that out in the evening light, I did do that, and it did seem like a safety issue back in when it first came up, which is why unfortunately it kind of fell to the wayside. But hopefully before we look at precedents, we maybe check those things out and see. But safety is number 1. I would like to pull out briefly number 1, the off-leash dog in nature parks. Thank you. Just a quick question over to staff on this. So this was a letter in regards to some of the Brooklyn Creek trails, and I know we get some letters down at Marina Park. It seems like complaints have been lessened over the last couple of years with off-leash dogs, and I'm just wondering if the general sense from the Parks Department is people are following that bylaw or those rules better, or if perhaps the level of complaints are just not coming through to council. From my viewpoint, it seems like we are getting less complaints, but this one is very valid from reading through it.
Great. Yeah, thank you for your question. I think it's more of a case of the complaints aren't coming through to council. Yeah, I do receive some to my address, specifically about the Northeast Woods, more so, I would say.
Thank you. And from a staff perspective, is that something that our bylaw department kind of stays shy of, or is that something that we do probably issue warnings or actual tickets on from a bylaw perspective?
I would say it hasn't been a point of focus for the town on enforcement. If it is an area that council would like to see us stepping up enforcement, I think council direction would be appreciated. It's something that council has talked about a number of times over the last number of years, but in those conversations, it has not always been unanimous that that is the focus that you want us to take. So I think that you have a staff that is unclear if council wants us to treat this as a priority or to appropriately let sleeping dogs lie.
Thanks. Okay, so perhaps just food for thought. Recently, I was at Marina Park and there was a dog that was being a bit disturbing. So we did ask the person to leash their dog and they just outright said no. So it kind of made me consider what the avenue is if there is a dog that's kind of disrupting a park or at the creek, etc. So I had thought that complaints were lower, but perhaps they're just going to staff directly and not to council. So
I can say Marina Park specifically is an area that we do watch out for. And if people have their dogs off leash, we will ask them to leash, but the Northeast Woods is not, or the McDonald Park is not an area that we have focused our enforcement on.
okay, that information is helpful just to ponder. Thank you. Are there any other discussion items for 1 through 5 on the consent agenda? Okay, so we are moving on to unfinished business. We have the Comox Valley Regional District request for a letter of support of their 10-year Comox Valley Waste Management Plan renewal from April 22nd from Sarah Wiley.
Second.
Moved and seconded, and we are sending a letter of support, just to be clear. Okay, so moved and seconded, sending the letter of support on their 10-year plan for the regional district. Is there any discussion or questions on that letter of support? All those in favor? Opposed? And that passes unanimously. Thank you. We are moving on to number 39, the modular pump track, which we postponed from April 22nd on council approving a $240,000 modular pump track upon receipt of a $25,000 grant from the Comox Valley Lions Club and a grant of $60,000 from the Comox Rotary Club. I had asked for that to be postponed at our last meeting just to make a couple of phone calls around to, we actually have 3 grants because the Comox Fire Association had also said they would have $10,000 towards the modular pump track or pump track. So speaking with Comox Rotary last night, they are open to the funds going to any Comox capital project this spring or summer that meets one of their 7 pillars with, it's called Mothers and Children, but youth recreation being one of their pillars. And so just having some questions to staff around, we really would like to see a youth recreation project go through, and we now finally have some grant funding that's starting to pool up with also the possibility of the Jumpstart Canadian Tire possible application. The biggest factor for council to move forward seems to be on visualizing the location for either the modular pump track to go or the the basketball multi-sports box. Is it possible, if council discusses, to put forward that we put it back to staff to provide a staff report in the very near future, prioritizing the grants, to say what locations these youth recreations would be located in, so that we can, finally get to solidifying which makes the most sense?
Yeah, thank you. I think that if we were to move forward on the pump track, we're at that point. We are at the point where it would just be choosing the location. But I think to your comments, we have the opportunity here to move forward with a really large grant from Canadian Tire, which may be worth north of $500,000. Right now, we are working with Canadian Tire and the school district to try and finalize locations for where this could go. I think we're close to, fingers crossed, we're close to understanding that. We're waiting to hear back from some of the Canadian Tire representatives. So hopefully we can come back to council in the first meeting of June or even maybe the next meeting in May to identify those. I don't need council direction right now, but I would ask that council maybe defer deciding on the pump track unless you are willing to enter into a budget amendment to deliver more funds. We would not be able to move forward with both the pump track and the Canadian Tire multi-sports court in the same year. Canadian Tire will pay for the construction of the court and everything involved, but we have to do the site prep, which will likely take the money that we've set aside for the pump track. And we're hoping that the community grantors are willing to move from the pump track to a different project, which I think is likely. So if we take those funds, we can capitalize on this Canadian Tire opportunity.
Thanks for that. I'll just go to Councillor Kerr for follow-up.
Yeah, this is an issue we, have debated for a while, and going back to that rec youth survey and the analysis done, I just remember that our town is pretty well served for younger kids in terms of recreation facilities, playgrounds and such. It was really the teenager cohort that was most underserved. And when I look at these 2 projects, certainly the and that survey again had outdoor basketball courts with lights as a high priority. It wasn't the highest, but it was up there. And so if we have the funds through the Jumpstart Canadian Tire program, which is amazing, I would prefer that teenager-based recreation facility rather than this other pump track, which I'd previously been supportive of all the way up right into today. But if we have to make a decision between the 2, then I think we should spend the grant money and funds to prep the ground so that Canadian Tire can do everything above, including the lighting, which is the key thing for this. To have a lit outdoor basketball / multi-sport court would be amazing for the youth of this community. Thanks.
Thanks for those comments, Councillor Mayor.
I just want to, I would say the same thing. My preference would be to prioritize the teenage years based on the outreach that we did a couple of years ago and based on an assessment of what we have available. And basketball is a really, really accessible sport when it's done properly. We're very underserved in this community in terms of public courts. So I'd be in favor of prioritizing that.
Thanks for those comments, Councillor Grant.
Well, I know where we could get a light to put up there. I'm just wondering, so what would we do to move forward? I think the Jumpstart program seems like actually a natural for us. So what do we have to do here to move forward with that?
I'll go back over to staff. It doesn't look like we need a motion if something is coming sooner than later, but from the conversation with Comox Rotary, they're really hoping to have some information back in June. So I think our timelines are maybe a little bit tight. Without a motion on the floor, would staff be getting back to council in the next 1 to 2 months, like May or June, with a proposed location or proposed locations, so that discussion could be had if it does look like we want to try to put as much grant funding as possible to this basketball court / multi. Do you require a motion for that?
No, we don't. We absolutely understand the timelines on this, and we are waiting for information to come back to us before we can make our decision. So we want to take full advantage of this opportunity. So while council's welcome to make a motion to direct us to do it, we will also be coming back as soon as we can.
So if we do nothing, then everything just stays on the table as it is. And we can make a decision later. Is that correct?
Correct.
I think my only concern would be it would be good to have some of the proposed locations come to council for discussion sooner than later, in case it's like a removal of some other recreation, or if there's some pros and cons that has to happen, like discussion on it. A motion is not required to bring back the proposed locations of this youth facility.
No, and that's not saying if council wants to tell us to, you can, but we are going to do it anyway.
Thank you. Councillor Haslett.
Would these potential locations be at our next strategic planning meeting in May?
We could talk about them at the next strategic planning meeting in May. We potentially have a strong location, a number one location, but we're just waiting to hear back from Canadian Tire on how we can configure the court. So I mean, I can say it, it's not a secret. So one of the things that we're looking for is, if you take a look at the sports box up at Highland right now, it is very aged, where roller hockey is taking place. So we're trying to understand from Canadian Tire if this multi-sports court can be constructed in a way that will also service roller hockey. And if it can, then we can replace the sports box with this new facility. And then that way something is coming in, it's replacing something that's aged out and needs numerous repairs, and it won't displace any other recreation opportunity. Where we are struggling on the staff side is, if that doesn't work, we are very limited on where we can put this, that it does not impact already existing recreation opportunities. So there is the possibility of putting it at the community center and taking out that youth playground. That is an okay location. You have playgrounds on Rob Road, you have playgrounds on the Coda Lil. But the problem is that youth playground specifically is well used by parents going from Rob Road to the community center. So that's the impact that you would have there. We're looking at potentially Anderton Park. The issue with Anderton Park is, if you put it beside the tennis courts, you probably have to make it smaller than what we could get otherwise, or you could take out the exercise equipment, but now you have a basketball court near Harborwood. And then the third location that we were looking at, what's the, yeah. No, the one over, no. Yeah, so over on Harborwood could potentially go there. They have an older area that needs to be revamp, but that area is also slated for redevelopment. And so there's the potential in the future for land swaps to get something that works better for the community on a final development. So the issue that we have is that we do not have open space to put a big court where there isn't stuff already.
Thank you. Those are the locations I know that were semi-floating around, but I think it's good for us to all realize at some point we might need to be picking between an A and B for that. So thank you. And the expediency is that some of the grant funders want some response back in the next month or two. So we'll just keep the dialogue open. Are there any other further questions on the modular pump track / youth recreation item from unfinished business? Okay, thank you for that update and for the continued work on getting that youth teenager project delivered. It's great. There are no special reports. We are on bylaw adoptions on page 46, Comox Reserve Funds Amendment Bylaw number 2025.03 for adoption.
Second.
That's been moved and seconded for discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? And that passes unanimously. We're moving on to new business on page 47. We have the tree protection bylaw update, and I believe we have a presentation this evening. So we will get that queued up.
Okay, that's
We
my
have
cue, I think.
Matthew online
Yeah.
from Diamond Head to do the presentation before we get into this item. Welcome, Matthew.
Thank you, Mayor Minions. And thank you, councillors, for having me back to discuss where we have gone on the tree protection bylaw update since I was last able to speak to you on March 11th at the Strategic Planning Committee meeting. I am looking forward to speaking with you tonight about just a recap of the project, where we came from in order to get to this point. Going with you over some engagement highlights, including engagement that occurred after our meeting on March 11th. We'll provide an overview or summary of the provisions of the proposed bylaw that's before you for tonight's agenda, before concluding the presentation with a few thoughts on implementation considerations if you do choose to advance with the bylaw update. So for Mayor, Council, and members of the public who may be watching this presentation, the tree protection bylaw update is one of the actions that was recommended as a priority by the recently completed urban forest management strategy that Diamond Head Consulting also assisted the town with preparing. And just a little bit about that urban forest management strategy. It provides a 30-year vision and strategic framework for the planning, protection, growth, and management of the urban forest, motivated by what it determined had been a fairly substantial loss of tree canopy cover in Comox in the last 6 years. So strategy 7 within that document dealt with updating tree protection regulations in the town, and it included these 6 sub-actions, which were to consider replacement of the current tree management and protection bylaw, which mainly applies to large rural properties, with a new bylaw that applies to all trees on town property, as well as a subset of trees across all property within Comox, as well as a number of other sub-actions, which councillors are well familiar with. So the engagement highlights, we did conduct 2 phases of engagement specifically on the tree protection bylaw following from the UFMS completion. So the first phase was dovetailed with an engagement process to wrap up that urban forest management strategy and took place between November 19th and December 19th of last year. And this took the form of an online survey within which there were dedicated questions asking in some level of detail respondents to tell us what they thought about possible directions in terms of the components of a new bylaw for tree protection. And phase 2 happened just recently, so between April 8th and 22nd of this year. And this included several opportunities for the public to inform the bylaw through an open in-person open house hosted at D'Esterre Senior Centre, which had 110 attendees approximately. An online feedback form, which was available following that open house and allowed people to review the open house presentation boards online who had not been able to review them in person and provide feedback to us that way. As of the publication of the agenda for tonight's meeting, we'd received 30 respondents in that way. And then during this period, we also hosted an in-person focus group workshop with representatives of the arboriculture, design and build communities, which included 14 attendees. So just to go over some of the engagement results that we heard about the tree protection bylaw process from the community in phase 1, considering how and where the bylaw should apply, there was strong support across the board for a bylaw that strongly supports the regulation of trees on private property, regulating tree cutting associated with development, as well as regulating tree cutting associated with other reasons. When it comes to the objectives that community members wanted to see associated for protected trees, there was strong support across the board as well for such issues as requiring replacement trees to be planted, requiring the involvement of professional arborists where required, incentivizing tree retention, especially for mature trees, and the need for the bylaw to make exceptions to its requirements in special circumstances, such as when trees must be removed to accommodate or account for safety hazards. Moving on to phase 2. So this, at phase 2, essentially a set of sort of draft components of the bylaw were presented to the public via a number of boards. And we received feedback at the open house environment via sticky notes and invited people to tell us, what they thought made sense, what didn't make sense, what could be improved, what questions should be answered. And I've just summarized on this chart some of the main themes that we received in those comments. The most common themes of the comments received through the open house included significant concern or interest in seeing a smaller diameter threshold than the proposed 30 centimeters at that time being incorporated into the bylaw, i.e. People wanted to see more trees be regulated. That was the theme on 11 submissions that we received at the open house. We had 15 submissions which specifically expressed a desire to see replacement ratios higher than the minimum 1-to-1 ratio referred to in the OFMS action under Strategy 7. We saw 20 submissions that specifically referenced a desire to see more tree retention on development sites. We saw 21 submissions specifically reference concern about this idea that a certain class of trees regulated by the bylaw would be able to be removed for any reason on an acceptable permit application. And we also saw 53 submissions express support in general for tree protection on private property. With regards to the focus group workshop, which occurred on the same day as the open house, the discussion was divided around 4 tables, each of which was dedicated to one topic. And that summarized essentially sort of the directions that we had taken from our March 11th meeting and sort of drafted some components of the bylaw around to discuss with the community about the open house and this focus group. And so at that time, the bars are showing on the chart sort of the levels of support, neutrality, and lack of support for what had been proposed. And you can see there's a high level of sort of, we can accept this from sort of, I guess, key informants in the arboriculture, development, design, and build communities with respect to different provisions of the bylaw, as well as sort of mixed levels of support and lack of support for different issues. With regards to feedback that was received following the open house, the themes of the comments received did echo what we heard at the open house itself, and they included 6 mentions of a need for stronger enforcement, 6 mentions of a need for stronger replacement requirements, 10 mentions of stronger protection for smaller trees and ecologically significant trees, such as native species. 13 mentions of concern about tree removal for any reason, echoing the result from the open house. And again, 21 mentions that were generally supportive of tree protection on private property. So with engagement for your consideration, I'd like now to go over what has changed since our April engagement period, as well as our last conversation at Strategic Planning Committee on March 11th. So previously on March 11th, staff were directed by Council with regards to the size of regulated trees. Council asked that we develop a bylaw that trees 30 centimeters and larger be regulated, with staff to report back on criteria for regulating certain classes of high value tree. It was confirmed that the bylaw should apply to all properties in Comox. It was also confirmed this approach about some subset of regulated trees under the bylaw, there being a desire to see a permissive approach that enables their removal at the discretion essentially of the applicant. While for higher value trees that there is a need to develop potentially or consider some additional protections. And with regards to replacement, Council also directed staff to develop a replacement ratio. So now I'm going to tell you what we are proposing in the bylaw draft that is before you today. And I'll focus my comments on 6 topics that I think are important for understanding the way that the bylaw works, what it protects, and where it applies. So with regards to where the bylaw applies, no change in direction here. So the bylaw will apply to all properties, both city-owned and privately owned. A permit will be required for the cutting of a regulated tree. And on the next couple slides, we'll get into what a regulated tree is. But for people who may be watching this at home or in council chambers, so it's important to understand that not all activities involving the cutting of a tree would be regulated by a tree permit system established by this bylaw. So regular maintenance that aligns with arboriculture best practices would not require a permit, for example. So the bylaw that we have before you, it uses some different terminology from the terminology that we were using on March 11th and during the second phase of public engagement. So initially we had used the concepts of protected tree and significant tree. We are now using the language of a regulated tree and a protected tree, where a regulated tree is essentially an umbrella definition that includes all the trees that might require a permit to be removed under the bylaw, where protected trees are a subset of those, for which additional protections apply.
Matthew, we're just going to pause you for one moment. We're having some tech issues that make it a bit harder to hear on this side.
Okay, yeah, just let me know when to proceed.
Sure.
I don't know. We don't know what's going on. We tested the sound systems 4:30 today. Everything was working fine. It's been working through the beginning of this presentation. I don't know what has changed from the start of when Matthew started speaking to now. I don't know that we're going to be able to address this. Matthew, can you try again and we'll see how you're coming through?
Is it just lots of gaps or cutting out? What's
no,
occurring?
We're getting a lot of reverb and feedback.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry about that. That's not very pleasant. So I should continue and we'll see. You can stop me again.
No, just pause for now. Maybe we'll take a break.
We'll take a quick 5-minute break. It's going to be important to get it working for this presentation. If you just give us 5 minutes.
Matthew, can you try leaving the meeting and coming back in?
Sure, I'll do that.
All right, but can you try again?
All right. Is that giving you reverb when I speak?
Can everybody just quiet for?
I'm wondering, is there a speaker near one of the mics in the room?
Go again, Matthew.
Okay. So as I was saying, the new bylaw defines
Okay,
a
we're
regulated.
hearing you clear now. Just, well, we're going to reconvene. Give me a second. Test. Can you hear me? Matthew, can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Yes.
Did you hear me any of the times before?
No, I did not.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can, but with a reverb. But I can manage that if it will allow people in the room to hear the presentation.
So Matthew, we're going to get you to back up 2 slides and then we'll get going here when Mayor Minions calls the meeting back to order.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for your patience. We're navigating some new technology issues that we thought we had sorted, but we're working through them. So welcome back to Matthew. We'll just get you to go back a couple of minutes. We missed about the last minute or two of your presentation. So we'll just get you to go.
Is it, was the engagement summary, was that heard?
I think at the end of that is great.
All right. So this last slide on the engagement summary from phase 2, the April phase of engagement following the open house, or rather including the open house. This slide is showing you that the feedback that we received via the online feedback form following the open house was consistent with the feedback that we received at the open house event. So high levels of concern or frequent concerns grouped around this allowance of tree removal for any reason for some class of trees regulated under the bylaw, a desire to see stronger replacement requirements, stronger enforcement, as well as general support for the project or the idea, I suppose, of tree protection on private property. So in this section of the presentation, I'm going to try to cover what the real content that you are considering tonight means in terms of the components of the bylaw, where it applies, and how it would work. So previously at the Strategic Planning Committee meeting on March 11th, Council gave us direction, which I will skip over here, but there have been a few changes to between the language that was, I suppose, shared on March 11th and the language that is before you tonight. And we'll try to highlight those as we move through the topics of discussion. So I have 6 topics for you, considering where the bylaw applies, the definition of regulated trees and protected trees, regulations on tree cutting, replacement, tree protection measures, and securities. So with regards to where the bylaw applies, so no changes from March 11th to now. So Council's confirmed direction on March 11th was that the bylaw should apply to all properties within the city. This bylaw does that. A permit will be required for the cutting of what we have called a regulated tree, and more on what a regulated tree is on the next slide. And this may have been missed during the technical difficulties, but to members of the public who are watching this presentation or sitting in council chambers, I wanted to confirm that so while the tree protection bylaw update, as developed, it does mean that there would be some new requirements around tree cutting on private property if adopted. There are activities that you may undertake around trees on your property that would not require a permit, and that includes regular maintenance of your trees, which aligns with arboriculture best practices, i.e. Practices that are unlikely to result in damage or the death of the tree. So, defining a regulated tree. So the bylaw has established, or the draft before you establishes an umbrella category of tree that will require a permit to be removed. And these are called regulated trees. And these regulated trees include a so-called priority species tree with a diameter at breast height greater than or equal to 20 centimeters. And I'll explain what priority species are on the next slide. It includes a tree other than a priority species with a diameter at breast height greater or equal to 30 centimeters, so reflecting Council's direction with regards to the scope of the bylaw on March 11th. Or a regulated tree also includes a protected tree, which is a separate subclass, which we'll get into momentarily. With regards to the priority species, so through engagement, we heard that people were interested in elevating the status and protection requirements around native species in particular, with consideration for regulating the biodiversity and natural environment that makes Comox unique. And so priority species, simply put, is most native species less two commonly found native species that are very effective at reseeding and regenerating on disturbed sites. So this list includes most of the large native tree species in your community, with the exceptions of red alder and black cottonwood, which are quite prolific at reproducing, and many bylaws elsewhere in the Lower Mainland with similar palettes of native species selection take similar approaches. The reason that these priority species are focused on is because these are the trees that are really representing potentially long-term native biodiverse assets in the town's landscape. And so the justification is that, by recognizing these species as such and subjecting them to regulation at a slightly reduced diameter, we're reflecting their importance to the overall urban forest. So regulated trees aside, what is a protected tree then? So a protected tree, we've already said it's included in this umbrella definition of regulated trees that will require permits under the bylaw, but specifically a protected tree is going to be subject to additional protection requirements. And what qualifies a protected tree will be a tree greater than or equal to 60 centimeters in diameter at breast height on private property, as well as trees of any size that are on town property, trees of any size that are retained or planted as a condition of a permit, trees of any size that are the object of a Section 219 covenant, unless the covenant is released. Any replacement tree that is planted as a requirement under this bylaw or as a permit condition under this bylaw, as well as a category called a retained tree, which can be used to reduce replacement requirements, which I'll be explaining more in short order. But the key note for the public who may have attended the open house is that the diameter for defining a protected tree has been reduced from 75 centimeters to 60 centimeters based on feedback that was received at the open house as well as through the focus group, during which arborists, several arborists mentioned to us that they thought that a slightly smaller diameter was more likely to represent the actual sort of spread of sizes, and thus the larger capture more of the large, important, significant trees located on private property. So with regards to the information requirements that will be required when somebody applies for a permit to cut or remove a regulated tree. So the bylaw makes a distinction between permit applications that are not related to a development activity. And for these, the application will include basic details about the address of the lot on which the cutting will take place, the legal identity of the person making the application, as well as the owner of the lot, the number of regulated trees and number of protected trees that are being applied for, as well as, very importantly, a short description of the purpose. For development-related applications, additional information requirements will apply. At a minimum, an arborist report and tree management plan, which shows protected trees that will be preserved on site, and accordingly, tree protection measures that must be followed will be required for permit application evaluation by the town. In addition, the bylaw does allow staff to administer other information requirements depending on the application. So some of those might include, there may be a need to correlate tree removals with a DP submission, a development permit submission. There may need to be a need to see a risk assessment of some kind, appraisal information for trees that are proposed to be removed, or other information that may be considered necessary by staff administering the bylaw requirements. So with assuming that a valid permit application has been received, the bylaw specifies the reasons that the town will approve cutting or removal of a regulated tree. So for a regulated tree that is not a protected tree, any purpose of the cutting or removal will be accepted. However, these trees, when removed, will be subject to replacement requirements, as I'll discuss on a later slide. And this reflects Council's direction on March 11th that for sort of the basic class of regulated trees under the bylaw, there was a desire to see a permissive approach presented that supported people to remove trees at their discretion from private land. However, with regards to a protected tree, so a tree that is over that 60 centimeters threshold or meets one of the other conditions, i.e. it's been planted as a condition of a permit, for example, there are going to be a list of specific reasons that apply or must apply for the town to issue the tree protection, the tree permit, and to cut or remove the tree in question. And those reasons include the tree being dead, it being a safety hazard that can't be mitigated in any other way, a wildfire hazard, as determined by a professional qualified to assess wildfire hazard. The tree may conflict with an approved building footprint that is proposed for construction and is otherwise legal under all of the town's other bylaws. The tree may conflict unavoidably with essential site elements, so effectively works and services contemplated by the subdivision development servicing bylaw, so your driveways, underground piping, electrical connections, things of that nature. The tree may be causing damage to buildings, or it may be an invasive species, and thus it may be desirable for it to be removed. So when trees are approved to be removed, replacement tree requirements would apply under the bylaw. And the replacement requirements that were developed, they start from what we heard from the public, which was that there is a strong interest in seeing replacement ratios over a 1-to-1 ratio be specified. And the approach that we've proposed is one that reflects the size of the tree being removed. So essentially, the larger a tree is, the more replacement trees should be required. And And what this looks like is you can see the categories in the slide here. So for trees that are between 1 to 19 centimeters in diameter, only one tree would be regulated. The trees under the bylaw of this size would typically be your replacement trees. Potentially maybe some trees that had previously been covenanted, or other trees that have been planted as a condition of a permit. For most regulated trees, so that next category over, so 20 to 59 centimeters in diameter, 2 replacement trees would be required for each one of those regulated trees removed. And then with 60 centimeters and up, we get into protected tree categories. And as you can see, essentially the number of replacement trees required that we're proposing increases, and it increases at a stepped rate. So trees over 90 centimeters or 100 centimeters in diameter, they actually step up by 2 rather than 1 in terms of the replacements required. And the reason that's been done is to incentivize, hopefully, the retention on site of these very large trees. So also with regards to replacement trees, so it's very important to understand the content on the previous slide and this one together, because they really are meant to be working together towards a common goal of incentivizing tree replacement while respecting the public's interest in seeing, their current trees and forest on their property, be acknowledged. We heard that at the open house from several people, that they were concerned that, a bylaw that doesn't reflect the fact that, maybe I already have 20 trees on my property. Should I not receive some kind of acknowledgement of that when it comes to the administration of the bylaw if I need to remove 1 or 2? And so what this slide is talking about is a credit system. And so what the bylaw proposes is that the number of replacement trees required is calculated via the information on the previous. That this number, the total number of replacement trees required per application, can be reduced by 1 for each tree that regulated or protected tree that is retained on the lot, so long as the lot or application will not remove greater than 10 trees within the previous 2 years. And so the reason that cap on the use of this credit system has been put in place is to exclude large-scale land clearing from being able to use residual trees around the edges of a lot to basically offset land clearing that may occur at subdivision on greenfield sites or prior to subdivision occurring, for example. So the way that this would work, if a property, say, an application was made to remove 1 regulated tree with a diameter of 30 centimeters, under the bylaw, that tree can be removed for any reason as long as the application is complete and valid. That normally would generate a replacement requirement of 2 replacement trees. However, if that lot already has, a protected tree on it or a regulated tree that can be successfully retained, and that is done, then that retained tree can be counted against the replacement tree requirement and thus reduce it. So 1 tree removed, 1 tree retained, 1 tree has to be replaced. We also heard from the public that people are very interested in criteria around replacement tree selection. The bylaw speaks to 3 main considerations with regards to this. So with regards to the size of trees that are replaced, what's proposed is that when 1, 2, or 3 replacement trees are required, at least one of them should be a medium or large canopy species, and these medium and large canopy species will be available to the public to review on a list prepared by the town, such as the Climate Resilient Landscaping Standards or an update or similar document list. When 4 or more replacement trees are required, at least 1/4 of them should be a large species. And the reason that this size requirement is put in and preserves some flexibility to include small species, it recognizes that not every site may have the room for a tree of medium or large size, but there is a desire to see replacement trees be planted on the property from which removal occurred, where possible, where feasible. Additionally, in addition to size, there is also, we're proposing that when a priority species, so one of these, multiple native species are removed, at least half of the total number of replacement trees required must also be one of those priority species. And if only one replacement tree is required, then it must be a priority species. So basically, trying to maintain or potentially, depending on the number of replacements required, increase the number of native trees on the landscape. The bylaw also makes provisions for cash in lieu. These are relevant to situations where replacement trees cannot be planted because they would not have sufficient growing space. The bylaw also allows for certain situations which could be imagined that it's desirable for the town to accept cash in lieu of planting if, for example, it may support a cash contribution to planting elsewhere that otherwise would go unfunded. These cash in lieu funds will be deposited in a reserve fund created for the town to plant and maintain trees. And cash in lieu and replacement requirements, there are some exceptions. So the bylaw stipulates that replacement requirements may be waived in two specific circumstances. One is where tree removal is necessary to mitigate a wildfire hazard. So obviously, if you're removing the trees and a qualified professional has said, yep, these are a wildfire hazard, it's a little unreasonable to expect replacement trees to be installed, which may, again, recreate the wildfire hazard. The other is when a tree is being removed for emergency purposes. And so this typically would occur only when a tree risk assessment has been made that determines the tree is a safety hazard, and thus the removal was valid in that way. Okay, so on to our fifth subject, tree protection measures. So protection measures required in a designated tree protection zone. So the bylaw defines a tree protection zone. By default, the tree protection zone will be basically the distance surrounding the tree's trunk in a circle at 10 times the diameter of that tree. However, this default can be varied by a tree management plan prepared by a qualified arborist. Protection measures that will apply once a tree protection zone has been designated include fencing has to be installed around that tree protection zone for the duration of the works that are being undertaken on the lot. Any work that may temporarily require access to a tree protection zone has to be pre-approved by the town as well as supervised by an arborist, which may be a town employee or a project arborist hired by the person applying for the permit. And signage must identify the tree protection zone so that it's clear to everybody who may be coming and going from the site, what the purpose of these areas are for. And so within these designated tree protection zones, the purpose of the land is tree protection. So there should be no soil disturbance, no regular access except otherwise approved, as I mentioned, and no storage of materials, for example. And then last but not least, so security. So tree permits that are taken or that are applied for in connection with development activities, they should require security payments be made to ensure the outcomes of the bylaw are achieved. And so two types of security payments are contemplated by the bylaw before you for consideration. They concern replacement trees as well as preserved or retained trees. The approach that we've taken is to mimic sort of the structure of securities under the Subdivision and Development Services bylaw, where securities taken are typically 125% of the equivalent value of the works or services being installed. So for replacement trees, that means 125% of the equivalent cash in lieu value held for 2 years after planting. And for preserved or retained trees, we suggested that it equal 125% of the estimated value of the trees, however, with some restrictions. So to make this navigable for applicants, many municipalities will cap the security on retained trees in particular. And so we've suggested an approach that caps securities for a single family dwelling or lot at $15,000 or $150,000 if the application for a tree permit is in connection with a subdivision, DP, development variance permit, or rezoning. And these amounts taken, they are repaid as long as the outcomes of the tree permit are achieved. Many municipalities use security apparatus to ensure that those tree planting and protection outcomes on sites with complex construction are achieved. So lastly, I'll just share a couple of thoughts on implementation considerations. So this slide was shared at our presentation on March 11th to the Strategic Planning Committee. I just wanted to sort of provide a brief visual summary of where we think roughly this is sort of moving Comox's current tree protection regime from and to in terms of the number of trees that are regulated and the level of restrictiveness on private property. And consequently, there is an intended, an implied impact on the implementation resources that will be required to administer such a bylaw. So currently, Comox's tree management and protection bylaw, it contains relatively few restrictions and regulates relatively few trees because of its limited scope, the limited area or number of properties to which it applies. If the bylaw before you is advanced and then at a future meeting adopted, I think it would be, it would be increasing the number of trees that are regulated, as well as some of the restrictiveness on private property relative to the status quo significantly. So the protection in particular to protected trees under this bylaw draft, I think it is considerable with restricted reasons for removal, clear measures for tree protection, and strong incentives to reduce large tree loss through replacement requirements. While the protection offered to regulated trees is less than what is proposed for those protected trees, focusing mainly on tree replacement as well as simpler and easier permit processing for applicants. At the choice of property owners, these regulated trees could be considered retained trees and thus elevated to protected status over time. Over time, what we think is that this bylaw would end up protecting a considerable and valuable portion of the urban forest within your community. So implementation considerations in relation to all of this, very simply, I mean, these are considered in the staff's report. So they include things like potentially increased staffing requirements. So of course, the new bylaw, as I've described, it would expand a tree permit process, which would of course increase demands on staff. There is uncertainty around the volume of permits because the number of permits in the area for which tree permits are taken right now is quite limited. However, in our work with other municipalities, anecdotally, we've been told that approximately one full-time equivalent staff member per about 250 permits may be required. Of course, this varies with the level of intensity with which the bylaw is enforced. And then in terms of awareness and outreach, a new bylaw, anytime it's introduced, of course, requires education and explanatory materials, both for the general public as well as people who specifically may be making an application. And these are just some of the considerations that I think need to be made, and we can discuss in just a moment at your discretion. So thank you once again, and I'm happy to take questions.
So maybe just before we do, I'm going to jump in. I'm going to be muting the TV when we speak, and then I will try and unmute it, Matthew, for when you have to speak, and then it's going to avoid the reverb issues that we're having. So bear with me.
Thank you, Jordan.
Okay, so thank you to Matthew. While we have Matthew online, we will look for questions that are directly for Diamond Head and their presentation tonight. And then when we actually get into the item, we'll be able to go over to staff questions also. But questions for Matthew on the update presentation from March 11th until now. Councillor Mayor.
Thank you so much for the presentation. We've received quite a few letters of concern from the public about the language of being able to cut trees for any reason on private property. Given the UFMS goal number 2, which is all about protecting Comox and the urban forest to prevent avoidable loss of ecosystem services, can you just speak to what the options, what alternatives might be to address those concerns?
I can speak at a high level to some of the alternatives that can be considered. However, I do think that I know that the language around allowing tree removal for any reason has raised concerns, and I appreciate that. It is, as I mentioned in the presentation, a much reduced level of protection relative to the other category of trees that would be regulated by this bylaw, those protected trees greater than 60 centimeters in diameter. I think the hope is that with replacement requirements and other, I guess, sort of wraparound type, education and awareness building around this bylaw, that many of those regulated trees, they could also be retained. That not all of them, like that some of them would be retained at the discretion of people applying for permits. So that aside, with respect to whether this bylaw reflects the direction set out by the UFMS, I do appreciate the links back to different strategies in the UFMS. I think, for me, the direction that, was set specifically with regards to this project does come from Strategy 7, in which, fairly specific directions were provided around replacing the current tree management and protection bylaw, clarifying protection requirements related to covenants, potentially establishing a higher level of oversight for a class of higher value or so-called significant trees at this time, which of course is now being sort of affected by the protected tree class under the bylaw before you. I think that really the bylaw that we have prepared, it does try to balance essentially those inputs from the UFMS process, which also receive community engagement, as well as what we've heard from council, what we've heard since from the community, and what we've heard from that focus group of arborists and designers builders. If you were to consider making amendments to the language in the bylaw or developing new language to complement this approach, I think the place to start would be to consider whether there are some restrictions that are acceptable in relation to reasons a regulated tree between 20 and 60 centimeters in diameter could be removed. Perhaps the approach might be to put a cap in terms of numbers per year or per application of regulated trees that can be removed without with a permit for any reason. That could be one option to consider. But I think that's something that I don't want to speculate about in this meeting. I think it would be better perhaps to I guess receive direction from council and staff on what we should investigate next.
Thanks, Matthew. In regards to the change on the diameter at breast height from 75 centimeters to 60 centimeters, which I believe you said came back from some of the arborist feedback.
Yes.
Do you know what change that was to the percentage of trees that then brought into regulated? There was some good percentages, like 80, 90% of trees fell in which category. Can you speak to what that 15 centimeter change did for the actual percentage of trees that would bring in?
I apologize. I actually don't have that number in front of me, but it is something that I could report back through staff to council if it is of interest. I'm going from memory here, but I believe we had 75 centimeters and it was approximately 10% of the town's public tree inventory. I think for folks listening to this presentation, members of the public, it is important to realize that the public tree inventory is not necessarily the best representation of sort of the spread of sizes in the community. And that's actually why we changed it, is because when we proposed 75 centimeters and said, oh, we think this roughly could be about 10% of the trees in Comox. People who were going to private property and submitting arborist reports in relation to development, they said, actually, we don't see many trees of that size on private land. And so the number 60 was suggested as an alternative that sort of represents the actual more realistic spread of diameters across private property.
So that may match more the 10 to 15% or 10% that was mentioned more accurately.
Potentially, yes.
Okay, thank you. I have a couple more questions, but I'll just look around to council for first questions. Councillor Haslett.
Thanks. I'm just curious, what would be the point of having a permit for protected trees on town property? Would we not just be providing a permit to ourselves and having our own staff then track the permits?
No, that's an important question. So I didn't get into this, but specifically, some activities by certain actors are not subject to the permit requirements of the bylaw. So, for example, the bylaw is not intended to apply to the operational work of town staff. So the town doesn't need to apply for tree permits when permits are removed from its own property. However, sometimes third parties, say developers or other members of the community, they may be considering a construction project that necessitates or may necessitate the removal of a tree on the adjacent boulevard, which is on town property. And so in those cases, I think it's important that applicants who are not the town that are undertaking activities which may impact town-owned property on which trees are found, that there is clear stated protection objectives, measures, replacement requirements that need to be met in those situations. But certainly, no permits would be required when tree cutting removal management is undertaken by the town's own staff.
Okay, thank you. Just looking for Councillor Kerr, and then we'll go to Councillor Mayer. Thank you.
Matthew, thanks for that presentation. That was really well explained. And also want to thank you and town staff for all the work that you did. I see so many improvements and changes based on feedback from the community in the current one, the current bylaw proposal. I'm still uncomfortable with this for any purpose, reason. If I have a 55 centimeter tree in my backyard that doesn't meet the protected category or criteria, and I don't like raking leaves or whatever reason, I can cut it down, even if it provides shade to my neighbor and tree canopy to the town and wildlife habitat, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm just wondering, for this middle category, the trees above 30 and maybe even the priority species above 20, are there some of the criteria that are currently listed, and I'm looking at page 50 in the agenda, some of the criteria listed in the protected tree approval reasons, and maybe not all of them, but could we use some of them and apply them to the other two categories? So it's not just for any reason, like I don't like the look of that tree. There should be some reason given to be able to take it down by a property owner. So just wondering, like, is there a way to just find a happy medium in there? Thanks, Matthew.
Yeah, I appreciate the question. I think, like I did suggest just a few moments ago, it is probably the first place to start if council were to consider making changes. I think the list of reasons that a permit to remove a protected tree can be issued, it is fairly restrictive. So you may want to consider the approach of simply capping the number of trees in that sort of middle category, the 20 or 30 to 60, those regulated trees that are not protected, simply by saying something like, 2 trees, one tree per year, one regulated tree per year for any reason, but otherwise these restrictions apply. And then you could simply use the same restrictions for both categories.
Matt,
there may, yeah.
I'll just jump in
Please,
here.
yeah.
So I've got to mute you when I talk. I'm not meaning to cut you off, but I think that your answer to the last question around staff taking it back and coming up with different solutions is probably the way to go, rather than trying to come off the cuff with different regulation changes that can happen. The draft bylaw that council has in front of you was developed based on the feedback that council gave through the last presentation. So I would say what staff and Diamond have brought is a pretty accurate representation of the direction that council gave us. If there's a desire for different solutions, for things to be more strict in certain areas, that's certainly something we can take back and do. But I do share your concern that you raised earlier, Matt, that coming up with regulations in this discussion for how this can be changed is probably best for us to go back, really consider the direction council wants us to take, and then bring back a new bylaw. Are you comfortable with that?
Thank you, Jordan. Thanks for the reminder.
Thank you for that input. just looking around for other questions. I'll just add a question in here. We heard some feedback from Lush Valley and the Food Policy Council just asking if in general, when looking at priority trees, if pollinator friendly trees or food producing trees come into play there. And that was a newer question since our last engagement. So just curious how that lens may or may not be applied to priority trees.
So with regards to pollinators and food trees, right now the list is only native species, so they probably don't include sort of the tree species that might conventionally be thought of as pollinator or food friendly. However, I would say that in terms of, I guess, at least sort of the biodiversity aspect, the priority species are representing a significant portion or component of the structure of the forest in natural areas, which would be used by native pollinators. Just simply because of the construction of the list, it includes essentially all of the, with two exceptions that I explained during the presentation, all of the native tree species that are currently found in Comox. With regards to food, that I think addition would probably change the nature of the list. There's no reason that food trees can't be considered for planting under, say, the replacement requirements of this bylaw if food trees are identified as an option available to applicants under the list of approved species that is prepared by Parks for administration of the bylaw. There are, of course, some concerns with food trees. Food trees are not generally, they're not always appropriate for every planting site or scenario, but certainly there would be no harm in trying to identify, a list of food trees that are acceptable as per sort of the small, medium, large requirements. So if people are interested in having a food tree on their property and they have to plant a replacement, giving that information to them so that they can choose one specifically, I think is something that could easily be done through permit conditions with the current bylaw text.
Okay, thanks for those points, especially on the replacement. That's helpful to hear. Councillor Haslett has a question.
Thanks. One more thing. It's just around the security for the tree permits. I don't remember seeing that initially, but I may have missed it. I'm just looking for a little bit more information around that. What my concern with it would be is looking for a fee up front from either homeowners or developers or someone trying to build a carriage house. And it just seems to me like it is something that's getting added before everything else, and it's just one more fee that somebody trying to build is having to pay. Is there a way that we can, if something like that is to stay in this, you look to get money after the fact if they've broken some rules? I get worried that it's one more thing that we're nickel and diming people when they're trying to build a carriage house or something like that.
I'm just going to remind the gallery that we don't do participation. So if you can please keep comments, it helps us run our meeting effectively. So just a reminder when we actually get into the bylaw that we do really appreciate not having participation in the audience out of respect. Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Haslett. There was a question to staff in regards to the securities, correct? Okay, over to CAO Wall.
I'll turn that over to Matt if you can talk about when permit or when the deposits are required and why.
Mm-hmm. So as the councillor has mentioned, so the security deposits are intended to apply only to those development cases. Yes, that might include situations where projects requiring a building permit are otherwise relatively simple, and thus, the additional requirement is relatively onerous when compared to, say, a multi-lot subdivision, for example. I think that may be what the councillor is getting at. I do agree. However, like I said in the presentation, the experience of other municipalities has been that sometimes there has to be money on the table to ensure that the tree retention outcomes are achieved. So without, that money being put forward and secured for the duration of the works, often there are issues with inadvertent tree damage that then the town has really no ability to mitigate after the fact. I think it may be interesting for the councillor to note that under the enforcement provisions that are associated with this bylaw, the town does have the ability to move offences under the bylaw to provincial court for long-form prosecution, but that is generally an option of last resort. The penalties under that option could be up to $50,000 per offence under provincial legislation. But in reality, most of the offences or infractions that are charged under this bylaw would be administered through the town's existing bylaw notice enforcement bylaw, for which penalties are limited to $500 per infraction. So it is possible that if sort of a post-fact enforcement approach were taken, that the town would not be able to recoup the cost of, say, potentially the protected tree damage, or the say, if replacement tree was failed to be planted successfully, it's likely that that $500 amount wouldn't be sufficient to correct the outcome. So I think that's a concern, and for that reason, many municipalities do use security regimes. Although I do appreciate the point. It is true that depending on sort of the size and scope of the application that is considered development, it can be more or less onerous for the applicant.
Sorry, Matt, can you expand a little bit more on how the permit fees are determined, or how the deposits are determined? When are they higher? When are they lower? So it sounded like what you said was when the building permit comes in, that's when these get triggered. If you can talk about how this becomes onerous and how the fee is calculated, that would be fantastic.
Yes. So essentially, so basically it is a per tree amount. So for replacement trees, essentially, administration of the bylaw review of the application would determine the number of replacement trees required. If it is greater than 0, then and development, and it's a development related application, then 125% of an equivalent cash in lieu value would be charged. And then held until successful establishment of those replacement trees, i.e. about 2 years after planting. So that cash in lieu value we didn't get into because that is subject to a future amendment to the fees and charges bylaw, which is where it would be lodged. But council will be able to consider appropriate cash in lieu values. However, our suggestion to staff through this process has been that you should start considering a cash in lieu value that represents the value of planting, acquiring, and establishing a replacement tree to be and to provide 2 years of establishment care. It should start at around $1,000. Cash in lieu amounts do vary by municipality. So if you go next door to Courtenay, you'll see in their tree bylaw that they have a much lower amount than that for replacement tree cash in lieu. But for cities like Victoria, they have a much higher amount. Theirs is $2,000 and Courtenay's is $300. So there is some variance, but that amount should reflect essentially the town's cost to plant, acquire, maintain, establish a newly planted tree. And the replacement tree cost should be based on that amount, because essentially where replacement tree failure occurs, it is incumbent on the town essentially to correct the defect by planting the replacement trees using the money held in the security. So that's replacement trees. Preserved and retained trees, this one's a little bit more complicated, but again, it's going to be based on a per tree value. That per tree value could reflect a cash in lieu amount potentially, or just a flat value if that's easier to administer. But it could also be based at the option of the staff administering the bylaw on an appraised value for cases where a very high value tree is in question. Those caps.
Matt, I think that's great
sufficient
explanation. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. I'm known to go on.
Thank you. I'll just look around the council table for further questions for Matthew before we get into discussion. Any further questions? Okay, thank you very much, Matthew, for answering that set of questions this evening. We are going to go back to page 47 on tree protection bylaw update. and we will get into discussion. And I just do want to thank the public. We had over 200 engagements over the last 6 months between open houses and forums, emails, phone calls, etc. So greatly appreciate the level of engagement. It just shows how passionate individuals and groups are about our urban forest management and its stewardship. So thank you very much for that level of engagement. On the table for discussion, are there any councillors who wish to make a motion? We have Councillor Grant.
Yeah, I think that just from listening to some of the discussion and some of the councillors had some concerns, I think we should probably refer this back to staff to have a look at some of those. And I think that before we do that, we should probably have a strategic planning meeting where we can sit down and really kind of get into how much we're talking about for some of these trees, what the reality is of some of the things that say Dr. Kerr had to say. And I think it would be best done at a strat planning meeting rather than sitting at the table here and trying to figure it out. So I would move that we move this to a strategic planning meeting to get some of the details before we relook at it.
I will second that for discussion. So the motion is that this be move forward to a future strategic planning meeting to talk about some of the concerns so far. I'll just look over to if staff has any comment on that prior to our discussion. Okay, I'd be in favor of that. I had some concerns with the strength of some of the verbiage for the trees between the 20 centimeters and the 60 centimeters. I think there's some more work that we can do to strengthen that. So I'd be in favor of continuing the discussion. Councillor Kerr.
Yeah, just briefly, I think that's a good idea, Councillor Grant. I think we're actually closer than we think we are. I think there's just certain language around certain topics, around certain sizes that just need to just finagle. And then I think what I'm wrapping my head around is I'm going to have to be okay with like good enough, because this isn't going to be the perfect tree bylaw, protection bylaw that I would want, that I would draft up on the back of a napkin. And I'm sure it's not the same and exactly what others around this table would want or everyone in our community would want. So I think eventually everyone in the community, including myself, we're going to have to agree that getting something on the table before this term is up makes a lot of sense, and it won't be perfect, but it'll be a lot better than what we have. And I think we're close. So looking forward to that strat plan and coming to that hopeful consensus and then voting for it in the near future. Thanks.
Thanks. We have Councillor Mayer and then Councillor Blacklock.
I am in favor of discussing things further, and I hopefully being able to address some of the concerns that have been raised by the community, and particularly around the language of being able to cut trees for any reason. And I also have heard some concerns that our discussions about regulating trees could be encouraging people to cut trees before they have to start submitting permits for them. I'm curious if staff can provide any advice on ways to mitigate potential harms like that.
I believe that some communities have enacted cutting moratoriums. So you'd have to pass a bylaw to put a cutting moratorium up so that it does not take place while these are being discussed. But this is a risk that develops anytime a municipality is looking at tree protection regulations. It's not uncommon. I'm not, I'll look back to Robbie. I'm not aware of this taking place. I haven't heard it.
I've heard that the city of Vancouver perhaps did that, but I'll have to look into that further.
I mean, more like I haven't heard of anybody rushing to get a tree off their property. It may be happening, but I haven't heard of it.
Yeah, we haven't received an increase in requests, because usually the public will check with us ahead of time, and it's consistent to previous years.
Okay.
Thanks. Over to Councillor Blacklock.
In the past, we've always used Section 219 covenants to protect specific trees on individual properties. I'm wondering if we can have, or if we have already been provided a complete list of those section 219 properties and the properties, the titles that those covenants are registered on. As I see here, we have in this bylaw a proposal that when determining future tree covenant requirements and discharges, we authorize staff to remove existing tree protection covenants when the situations arise on low density properties where community or neighborhood conditions do not support retaining the covenant. And I know we've made a section 219 covenant a condition of development on and a condition of subdivision in the past. So I'm just wondering how many examples in the town do we have of that, those kind of covenants being registered to protect trees?
Director Ashfield, do you have any idea?
I have no idea, but we do have it all mapped out, so I could get that information to you, but we do have it.
So I think that should be part of our, I do support the motion to move this to strategic planning, and that's something that I would be very keen to see, because there seems to be this idea that Comox hasn't been protecting trees, and we have. We have moved before on when we can to save trees. So I don't, subscribe to the thing that Comox is anti-tree by any means. And I think we've all heard through the public engagement process that trees are important to, not just the property owner today, but the property owners in years and decades and centuries to come. So I look forward to our next strategic planning meeting.
Thanks, and thanks for bringing up those covenants. That was one of the questions. I think it was part 4 after third readings was just discussing what type of criteria or matrix there would be for planning to be able to remove that covenant. So it sounds like that's something we can just address when we jump into the strategic planning session. Before we vote on moving this to a strategic planning session for a bigger deep dive, are there any other comments or notes? Okay, all those in favor to moving to a strategic planning session in the near future? Opposed? And that passes unanimously. And just very quickly to speak briefly on it, we have no tree bylaw on private properties at this moment. So I just want to speak to the intent of doing the tree bylaw is to increase protection of tree removal in the town of Comox. There was some different levels of communication speaking to it, making it easier for people to remove trees, and we have no tree bylaw on private property at this moment. So the intent is to be able to regulate and save some of the urban forest canopy in Comox, and I really do believe that is the intent of the new bylaw, and getting that bylaw right is very important to all of us. So thank you for that discussion, and we will be talking about that soon. Moving on to our next item, we are on page 140. We have the 2025 audited financial statements to be accepted and received for information, and further that the 2025 audited consolidated financial statements be approved. Moved and seconded.
Second.
Thank you. Now for discussion, any questions or comments on the audited financial statements? All those in favor? Opposed? And that passes. And we will just take a very quick 2-minute break. You're welcome to stay for the remainder of the meeting, or if anyone needs to, we'll take a quick 2-minute break. Thank you. Okay, we're going to get back to it here. We are on page 205 of the 2025 Statement of Financial Information Report for approval.
Second.
That has been moved and seconded. And any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? And that passes unanimously. Thank you. We are now on 2025 to 2029 Financial Plan Bylaw Amendment, that the Comox Financial Plan Bylaw number 2046 be amended to add the projects and initiatives as set out in Appendix A as attached to the May 6th, 2026 report from the Director of Finance titled 2025 to 2029 Financial Plan Bylaw Amendment, and further that the Comox Financial Plan Amendment Bylaw number 2046.01 be given first, second, and third reading.
Moved. Second.
Moved and seconded. And for discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you. We're now on page 257 for E. We have that the 2025 to 2029. It should be 2026 to 2030, correct? Okay, thanks, Director. That the 2026 to 2030 budget be updated to include the budget carry forwards and additions listed in Appendix A and B as attached to the May 1st, 2026 report from the Director of Finance titled 2026 to 2030 Financial Plan Bylaw, and further that the 2026 to 2030 Financial Plan Bylaw 2046 be given first, second, and third readings. And I would like to make a motion that we consider moving first, second, and third with the amendment that we remove 1% off of the special projects budget. If there is a seconder to consider.
Second.
Okay, so for discussion, looking through the plan for 2026 to 2030, I really think we went through specific line items and projects and found all of the savings that we possibly could find. But under the special projects budget, there is approximately 140 to 150 or just above 1% that is unallocated special projects. And I would like to see that come off of our levy, which would be an approximate reduction to 7.96% for residential properties and potentially 7.3% for the business properties. So for discussion. I'm going to go to CAO Wall and then Councillor Grant.
I just wanted to be clear. So what Mayor Minions is moving forward is a 1% reduction in the overall increase. The way the actual impact on the special projects budget is a 20% reduction. So it's not a 1% reduction in the special project budget. It's a 1% reduction in the overall tax increase, a 20% reduction on the special projects budget.
Overall, yes, thank you. Councillor Grant.
Yeah, so my question on this is what impacts will this have on our special projects budget? Like if we take it out, it sounds like a great idea. I'm just wondering, like, does that mean we have less money to spend in the future? Is like, I just want to be clear on how this is working, what the implications are going to be.
That's correct. If you remove this from your special projects budget now, it means if you need to spend $500,000 next year, you'll have to do a tax increase in order to put that money back into your operational cash flow.
Okay, so what would cause us to have to do that? Do you foresee anything coming that would make that happen?
Yes, I do not believe that the town of Comox is bringing in enough revenue to sustain our operations, and that we are going to need to increase our revenue in the next term significantly to deal with things like a needed modernization of the finance department. We have a collective agreement that has 5% salary increases, which requires a 5% tax increase as well. We're looking, if you look at in the last meeting, we presented a picture of our reserves, which are dwindling very quickly as we do our capital replacement. So I think the reality is that we need additional funds coming in, any funds that we're not bringing in now is just more funds we'll need to bring in later unless council moves forward with spending reductions.
Well, I guess that brings up the next question is, you know, that means that council in the future is going to have to really be thrifty with what they spend, and there will be no extra stuff being able to be brought to the table if we were to do that. Am I wrong with that, or am I like, I don't want to take this off and then add it back on again next year. That doesn't make any sense to me. If we can take it off and leave it off, then that's good.
It's just a tough question to answer because it depends how you look at things. You can take this off of your special projects budget and not put it back into your special projects budget. How you're going to fund the modernization costs needed in your finance department, I don't know where that's going to come from. The special projects budget alone is not enough. If we take a look at Campbell River, I think their overall modernization cost for their finance department, which ours is in a similar state to theirs was prior to their modernization push, cost them nearly $3 million. So that money taken out of the special projects budget could go towards part of the cost for the finance aspect of things. So if you take it out of this year's budget, you're going to have to make it up in the future on different areas. To your point, does it stop you from doing anything in the future? No, because you can just increase the taxes more in the future to make up for the fact that you didn't increase them as much now.
Well, that's what I'm trying to avoid. So that's the whole reason for my question, actually.
Just to counter that, when we're talking about, 5% increase to unions, that's operational funding. The specific special projects is currently being requested for unallocated discretionary funds. And we have one of the highest tax rates we've seen, if not the highest tax rate we've seen. So I think it's a future decision for councils, but we used to have a special projects budget around 300,000 and that has grown to upwards of 500,000. So regardless of what future operational spending needs are, this one line item is not at this moment required for this year, and a future council will have to make that decision. But to collect an extra $140,000 that we don't know is needed this year, to me, is not the responsible thing to do. So I think those are different categories when it comes to operational spending. Councillor Mayer.
I just want to make, I'm also asking clarifying questions for staff. So this would reduce the special projects budget from 500,000 to 340,000. Is that correct? And my second question is if you can just remind us, 385,000. Okay, thank you. The special projects budget, my understanding is that we use it for things that we effectively haven't planned for far enough in advance. So we are likely just to defer the costs by planning for them, if I'm imagining it.
So just on the motion on the table would be to reduce the revenue that we're going to collect by 1%, which is about 115,000. So reduce your special projects budget from 500,000 down to 385. So special projects are not unplanned expenditures. They are they're planned expenditures that don't fall within your tangible capital assets. So your special projects can be things like reports or studies. Sometimes we use them for purchases of smaller capital. We've used them for the pop-up parks, for example. We use them for some of the IT things. So special projects is not unplanned. It's just generally planned projects that are not covered within your normal yearly operational budget and are also not a tangible capital asset acquisition. So could the town move forward on a 385 basis on special projects rather than a 500. That is almost more a question for, it's not almost, it is more of a question for council than it is for staff. This is how you want to spend and invest your money into the organization and how much you want to have there. That 500,000 amount was set with council probably 3 or 4 years ago, looking at our historical spends and our spending needs going into the future. Again, we don't have an answer on the question on how we're going to fund the modernization of the finance department. We were able to fund the modernization of some of our records keeping and the planning department because we got the housing accelerator funds. That is not going to be available for the finance department moving forward. So reducing that from 500 to 385 is fine. That 115 was not going to fund your the modernization needed in the finance department anyway, but it is funds that could go towards it. So to Mayor Minion's point, if you want to look at it, funding that in a different pot, you're more than able to. I guess the point that I'm making is that overall we need to increase our revenue collected, and we're going to need to increase our revenue collected in the future.
Councillor Haslett.
So it's pretty clear that taxes in the future are going to be going up. When we're looking to do things like, say, reduce this to 385 or keep it at 500, whatever it may be, we've all been through that special projects list kind of line by line to see what's in there, and everything's pretty thin. How much of that money is then, so say this year it's at 500 grand and we spend 275,000 of it. Does the remainder of the money go into general reserve? Does it sit in a rainy day bank account for when we get hit with new police officers? Does it go to things like overages on the fire hall? Does it go to, how do we ensure that the money that we're collecting, if it's not being spent, that we are holding on to it so bloody tight that the only thing it can be used for is paying for these monster line items that are coming up for us, like RCMP or sewage plants or whatever else it may be?
Yeah, so that's some of the work that Director Henley's been working on and bringing and establishing our reserve bylaws and where the funds go. And so we have these new reserves that have been created. Generally, what has happened in the past is that when the funds come in, they will go into the general expenditure reserve, but we have new reserves getting created. If you, we saw the auditor's presentation, we have about $1 million in unfunded liabilities. So those are things that we have to start to collect cash towards and make them, instead of unfunded liabilities, funded liabilities. And that's where the easiest way I can answer this question, council, is when we don't spend the money, we're putting it into reserves. Our capital reserves are dwindling quickly as we do our replacement. We have unfunded liabilities that when we have extra cash, we can put them towards that. So the money that we collect and we don't spend are going to offset our future costs. So one of the things that I think is really misleading when you watch auditors' presentations is it makes it look like municipalities are in a much better fiscal situation than they actually are, because the auditing standards generally come from the business world. So when you take a look at those things in the business world, you say, oh, look at all of this tangible capital assets we have. Look how much funding this is worth. And from a business perspective, that makes sense, because if you ever want to move away from your business, you can sell those tangible capital assets for cash. Those are real positive assets that you have. Because in a municipality, we are not moving towards selling our capital assets, nor would we. They're liabilities, right? And so that's where I think things get a little bit tricky when you're looking at the traditional accounting auditing versus what you have in the municipality. What we have in the municipality, that value of assets at $180 million, which makes our balance sheets look really good, those are liabilities that we need to cover moving into the future. And so we have a decreasing reserve amount, we have unfunded liabilities, and we have future cost increases coming. What I can say is any money you remove from the budget today, you will have to make up for in the future. So your question is, can you use that money that's coming out of the 500 and is unspent on policing, for example? You could say next year, hey, we are going to permanently live with a $385,000 special projects budget, and we're going to reallocate that 115 towards the new RCMP costs that are coming. That's something that you can do. If it's 385 now, then that's not something that you can do. Does that make sense?
Just to speak to the increase to the special projects budget about 3 years ago, that was a different economic time where we were making a different decision type. So if we're looking at 8.96 tax increase every year for the next 8 years, our taxes will go from like 4,000 to 8,000. It's going to double in 7 to 8 years. So I recognize that 1% off of 9% is not a huge amount, but we do not have special project funding from that 500 to 385. So I think to collect it and say it will likely go into reserves. The reality is if we set a special projects budget of 500,000, the likelihood is that it will get spent. Maybe it goes to reserves, but when it's in special projects and that's our approved budget, it is very likely to get spent. So that's my thoughts on collecting at a $500,000 level that we set 3 years ago. Councillor Kerr.
I think around the table, that I kind of like the special projects fund because it gives us the ammunition in our pocket if we need it to do things that are important. However, we also asked our senior staff and staff in general to come up with some ideas to cut funds or cut our budget. And we put them through that exercise and asked them to be lean. And so I think it's right that we do the same. So although it pains me to do so, I will support Mayor Minion's suggestion to reduce our special projects fund. And I do know in the back of my mind that if there's something we absolutely need to do and should do as council, we could always add that money back in.
And it is with an understanding that moving forward, the budget would be set at that or would have to be increased if we determine special projects would have to go higher. Not that we voted on this, so. Any further questions or comments? The motion on the table is that we vote for E as read with 1% off special projects from 500 to 385. Councillor Haslett.
So are there things in the special projects list that, like say this year, we're sitting at 500 grand is what we're planning on spending. And then is there stuff that's just going to get moved from here into another section of funding so that we can make sure that they happen or have to happen?
From the last time we did the financial plan, the 1% was not allocated to any special projects that we approved, but I'll just go over to staff. So that was unallocated special project funding. That was one option that could be cut.
That's correct. So the way our special projects budget was created, council got a list of special projects suggested by staff. Some of them were added by council. Council, you went through them and you reduced it somewhere around 300,000. I want to say the final, the number was. And so that extra amount to be collected would go towards the different reserves in the reserve policy that Director Henley brought to council and council adopted in one of the last couple of meetings. So any money that we collect that is not spent in the special projects budget goes into one of those reserves.
Thank you. Any follow-up, Councillor Haslett? Okay. We're still on page 257 for 2026 to 2030 financial plan for discussion. Are there any further questions before we vote on first, second, and third reading as amended, which is a reduction of about 20% to the special projects or 1% on the overall tax rate? Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? And that passes unanimously. Thank you. Just going on to page 265 for the 2026 tax rates bylaw. Would we just read these? Sorry. We'll take a pause. Director Henley and CAO Wall now need to discuss what that may update.
Yeah, so Director Henley was madly crunching the numbers to try and get us an answer tonight, but I think what I would rather ask council to do is to say that you approve tax rate bylaw to be created with an increase in revenue of 7.96% for residential properties on the, no, that's not the way to go about it. Give me a second. No, we need to get direction. Just give me a second. I have in my mind the direction that we need. I just need to verbalize it.
We're just going to take a quick 2-minute break.
I'm ready to go if you are. Yeah, he should not. Council, I would suggest for now that you put the following motion on the table, that council direct that tax rate bylaws be created that reflect a 1% decrease in revenue from the financial plan bylaw submitted to council on May 6th, 2026.
Moved.
Seconded. So for discussion on what CAO Wall just repeated, does that replace all the way 1 through 5?
1 through 3.
Okay. So in replacing on page 265, 1, 2, and 3 for discussion, it's as read, but the bylaw would be reflective of the 1% change to special projects. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? I'm just going to do that one more time. All those in favor? Opposed? That passes unanimously. Number 4, that council approve the tax rate bylaw as mentioned above, with the infrastructure renewal fund of approximately $155 to the average residential property on the general municipal levy. That has been moved and seconded for discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? And that passes
Can I just ask
unanimously.
a question before we move on? I
course.
missed it when we were going through these numbers. So does that affect our commercial and industrial taxes as well?
Yes, that's the motion is we've got to go figure out how that's going to all break down proportionally. So our plan would be to bring to establish rates that that change in proportion with each other. So this
That's
not to put it towards any specific class, but to change it
right.
proportionally to what we've presented today.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for the question. And further, we would not be reading number 5 tonight. Is that correct? Until the new bylaw is brought forth.
I just want to talk to Director Henley around timing. So we'll need to bring the tax rate bylaws to the strategic planning, get 3 readings, because it's got to be done by the 17th, correct? Use your mic.
The idea was to adopt on the 13th. There are some rules from the province. Let me just pull that up. I believe there has to be at least 1 business day between the readings and the adoption. So you can't have it one day and then immediately the next day or something like that. Let me just pull that up quickly.
So I think what we would do. Yeah.
First 3 readings of both bylaws on or before Tuesday, May 12th. They have to be, they have to be on or before Tuesday, May 12th. They moved it up this year. So we're gonna need a
So we will
special meeting.
we will create the tax rate bylaws. We will bring them back to council. We will have to have a special meeting in order to do the first couple readings, and then we can adopt on the 13th. So I think we'll talk about it offline, but I'm guessing we'll target a special meeting for the 10th. No, 11th. No. 11th.
We're
And
going to
then
get back
adoption
to
on the
schedule.
13th.
It sounded like it had to be May 12th. So no.
The first 2 readings before the 12th and then adoption before the 17th. Is that what it is?
This year, the adoption is on or before May 14th.
Yep, so we'll do first 2 probably on the 11th, adoption on the 13th. So council, you have to be very comfortable that this is the direction you want us to take. And as long as that's the case, there is no, after this meeting, when we come back on the 11th, there's no more changes. If you do not adopt a tax rate bylaw in time, technically you're not allowed to collect taxes for the year. So that would be a massive revenue hit we would never crawl out of. So we will create the tax rate bylaws based on your direction, and there can be no more changes next time.
It's actually a good election to be no tax increase this year. We got them at 0.
Just to confirm, we are not doing number 5 because we were going to have a special meeting. Okay, so I'm going to move on from that.
Okay, and the special meeting is on Monday, right? Is that correct?
We will announce, we'll talk about it tomorrow, maybe, but right now, when I look at it, I think Monday, Wednesday makes the most amount of sense.
Okay.
And they can be quick. We can schedule them during the day, do it electronically. We'll figure something out.
We got May Days in Cumberland on Monday, so we will work this out. Okay, there are no new notices of motion under correspondence. There are no items, late items, no items. We are now on page 278, the business arising from the public hearing. We have the zoning amendment bylaw number 2056.02 for 1301 Knight Road for consideration.
Move third reading.
You're good.
Reading.
Okay, is there a seconder for discussion? Okay, so for discussion, the zoning amendment bylaw. Is there any questions or comments? Councillor Blacklock.
Well, we have heard tonight from our one speaker with respect to the neighboring property to the southwest, and I thought she raised an excellent point around noise mitigation. Do we currently, or will we require any sort of fencing of that property at 1301?
No, we don't have any proposed, although we do have a fairly significant buffer, tree buffer that we're requiring. I would just say that this property is already zoned for fairly heavy industrial use and has been for at least 15, if not more, years. So the type of use that's being proposed here is actually quite a bit lower than what could be in the zoning that they currently have. Not to say council couldn't require it as a condition of rezone, but it has been zoned as an industrial property for quite some time.
Is there any risk on it going to the CD comprehensive development that there could be other things outside of the current proposed business use? Like, does that open it up to like the word development or further development, or does it really limit it to basically those commercial uses that were spoken to?
This is quite a restrictive use. So something that was brought up in the public hearing was this land was identified as undevelopable. So that's not quite, this land and the other lands are not quite undevelopable. The issue is stormwater. Those areas can't be, the stormwater can't be gravity fed into the Queen's Ditch, I believe is the issue, right? So those properties can't have their stormwater gravity fed into the Queen's Ditch. What's unique about the proposal on this lot is that it's a soil making operation. And so the stormwater management plan that was submitted to the town shows that there will not be an increase in stormwater runoff, which allows them to move forward without having to come up with a stormwater management plan that would manage it. It's the same for any of the other properties. If they're able to demonstrate stormwater management plans that don't increase runoff and don't increase stormwater flow to other properties, they are able to move forward with development. And so for this property, they're not proposing a level of impervious surfaces being added to it. And then we are trying to lock that down through our zoning to say, yes, you can do what you're doing here because you're not adding impervious surfaces. In fact, you're adding soil that's likely to retain more stormwater flow.
Councillor Haslett and then Councillor Mayer, please.
This might be a little off topic, but maybe it's right on topic. How would having this property as a dirt farm affect our stormwater management plan in the area? Would it affect it at all? Would, because that property isn't just going to have water flowing through it into the Queen's Ditch, it's going to make the rest of it different, or?
It's not going to materially change anything. The reports that we got back indicated that any resulting impervious that are created from any roads or buildings that are placed on it is going to be more than offset from the amount of water retention from the soil on the property.
Councillor Mayer.
I'm generally in favor of this. And I do think it's really reasonable to have a buffer for sound in particular for residents. I'm surprised that there wouldn't be already something. Is there like a best practice or something that would be pretty an easy motion to make that would just, the trees might be enough, that might be enough of a buffer, that might be the most effective buffer, I don't know. But just some consideration of a buffer seems like a reasonable expectation.
No, generally when you are moving from one property use to another, there's usually not buffers created. If you are backing onto a commercial property, council may recall that we had some concerns in the past from properties that backed onto Ace Hardware. Right, it's a commercial use that backs onto residential. We have, if you take a look at our zoning map, we have our industrial properties backing onto residential properties on the west side of our industrial sites. We don't require fencing, nor would I say it is normal for that to be the case. Not that it doesn't happen, but I wouldn't say it's the normal requirements. Director Houle, do you want to comment at all?
Sure. Yeah, just to add, there is a fence that will be required, but it's a chain link fence and it's mainly to provide a delineation so that they don't store their piles of dirt into the buffer. So council could require that to be solid, but I'm just not sure if a 6-foot fence or concrete fence would really provide that sound barrier. I think because the area that is adjacent to the neighbor's property, most impacted is near the back of the property. It is possible that that's where they'll store the giant dirt piles at the back of the property, which would provide a natural sound barrier in itself. But it is definitely difficult to provide a proper sound barrier beyond the buffer that's being maintained in this case.
And Director Hill, can you talk about the current zoning on the property versus what's being proposed? So what would be allowed in the current zoning versus what's proposed?
Yeah, sure. The current zoning is light industrial, which is why we went with a CD zone to not create that precedent. So it does identify that in the council report. So we are being intentionally restrictive with this new zone. So limiting it to outdoor processing of sorting of sands and vegetative landscape mediums, we're calling it. So it does involve composting, but only from yard waste. There are other restrictions in here as well.
I mean, I think the question I'm trying to, or the information I'm trying to get to, if you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but the proposed zoning is actually a lower use than what the current zoning is.
Yeah, I'd have to bring up the current zoning to look at that. There are less uses in the proposed zone, so it is more restrictive, but it's difficult to say if those would have a larger impact. If you look at the permitted uses we're showing is the outdoor processing and sorting of sand. So they are giant dirt piles, which wouldn't be permitted now. So you could argue that is more intensive. There is outdoor storage, and then some of the secondary uses being plant nursery, caretaker suite. So that is a difficult question to answer. There are less uses permitted, but they could be more intense. But as I mentioned, that's why we're going with the CD zone, to not allow even larger, heavier industrial uses to be allowed.
Thanks. And just a question to make sure I understand, the buffer around the property is the 3-meter landscape buffer that's required before operations could go to the edge of the property? Is it 3 meters all the way around?
Through to the mayor. No, the buffer is much larger than that. It's 7.5 meters on most of the sides. There's an additional buffer that was requested by the fire department to ensure that they go even further than that with compostable material. So an additional 3 meters from the buffer to help avoid wildfire impacts.
Okay, so the actual neighboring property buffer is about 7 meters, 7.5 meters.
That's correct. And we were on the site yesterday with the property owner, and there is also approximately 25 feet of that buffer is actually on the neighbor's property as well. So the buffer also extends to the neighbors.
Okay, thanks for clarifying. 3 meters did not seem nearly enough. So, Councillor Blacklock, did you have a question?
Yeah, I'm just looking at the site plan, which is in our package that was set separately on the council agenda. And yeah, it from the estimated area of operations, there is a pretty significant buffer there to the back line on the south boundary. So, you know, it's not ideal. It's something I can live with. I would also note that this property has it's got the existing cell towers on it as well, which I remember those went in quite a few years ago. So yeah, I have no question.
Great, just looking if there are any further questions or comments from council. Okay, again, this is on 1301 Knight Road, 2056.02 for third reading. All those in, sorry, Councillor Blacklock.
One final question. Is there any restriction on the height of the dirt piles? Like one thing that always impresses me when I go past the one across the street is how high those things are.
I'm I'm gonna just look to staff for that clarifying question to Director Houle.
Yeah, we did put a provision in there that limits the height to 22 meters, which is quite excessive. It's similar to the height of the piles across the way, but we did ensure that that the trees will extend above that. There are some trees obviously that are lower than 22 meters, but there are quite a few trees that will extend over the height of those piles in the existing buffer to continue to provide a buffer.
Any follow-up, Councillor Blacklock? Okay, so we are on third reading. All those in favor? And opposed? And that does pass unanimously. Thank you. Okay, we are on reports from members of council. I will go to Councillor Blacklock.
Just quick reminder for those of you who are interested, the Comox Business Improvement Association AGM is next Thursday at the Golf Club, 5 p.m. So please be sure to share that invitation with anyone you think may be interested, particularly our business owners in the downtown area. Lots of exciting stuff coming this summer, including a Float Your Boat Market Fridays down here at the marina. And of course, we've got our current hockey games going on the screen down in the public space. And the other one was we are looking at potentially talking with a company about putting on a summer movie night, but that is still in the works.
Thanks. We'll go to Councillor Haslett and Councillor Kerr.
Had a nautical days meeting. Everything's progressing as we can hope there. And then the STAIR has a new executive director. Ian Kalina has been brought on effective this week, and they're going to be hosting a 50th birthday party anniversary here in the near future. And I've got those dates somewhere, but I'll be sure to mention that going forward. So welcome, Ian.
I just want to thank the Comox Valley Chamber of Commerce and all of the local Valley businesses that put on the Nine and Dine event. Pleasure to play with Councillor Grant, Councillor Haslett, and the mayor. And I know Councillor Blacklock was also playing on a different team. Residents of Comox will be proud to know that the town of Comox team defended our home turf and won, and are the victorious team, and will defend our title next year. Also, just want to thank the mayor for attending a special event, and I want to recognize Dr. Carol Austri, a longtime family physician in Comox who just retired end of last month. 38 years serving in the community, delivered hundreds of babies, and saw many patients along the way. And thank you to the mayor for coming to her retirement party and thanking her on behalf of the town. And lastly, I did attend the AVICC, the conference in Victoria on behalf of the town, and just lots of interesting conversations. Nothing too controversial, but I did just one stat stuck out. There was a healthcare recruitment session, and did you know that 10% of all people that live on Vancouver Island work for Island Health? That's a huge number, and that doesn't include everyone that works in healthcare outside of Island Health. So we do have an aging population on the island. Many people work in healthcare. Just a stat that stood out, and I know there's some plans to do some kind of resource planning and human resource planning as well in the Valley coming up. So anyways, just thought I'd share that little nugget.
Councillor Grant, Councillor Mayor, please.
Nothing to report.
I attended a Food Policy Council meeting where we are already talking about water and concerns about water, and there was more discussion about pollinators. Mayor Minions attended as well, so you may have other things to report. We are very shortly going to be announcing our new executive director for the museum, which we're very excited about. And I attended a seaweed symposium as part of my day job today, tomorrow, and the next day in Campbell River. And it is quite fabulous to learn about both the economic and ecological values related to seaweed. So you may hear more about that in the future. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone. Just quickly, today is McHappy Days across the province, supporting Ronald McDonald House, and locally our McDonald's supports Foundry Comox Valley, which is supporting mental health services for youth aged 12 to 24. So thanks to Councillor Blacklock, the Comox Fire Department, Phil Burke was there, Heritage Lodge, and a couple other groups. They raise quite a lot of funds over the last 12 years for those local services, and they're still open till 11, I believe. So 10% of all the profits go to Foundry and Ronald McDonald House. So thanks to Comox for participating in that fun annual event. Attended the hospital for the annual donation from Enterra. They give back to the Comox Valley Hospital Foundation every year, and this year's funds are likely to support the ongoing needs of our ER, which is seeing many visits. I've heard about double what the expected ER visits were. I'm not sure the accuracy of that number, but a very busy ER department. So thanks to Enterra for their public donation program that they have. Attended the Comox Valley Chamber of Commerce AGM about a week and a half ago at 40 Knots, and it saw Ramon Ramirez step down as the president and go to past president, and Lisa, I believe Nielsen, is the new president, and they welcomed 3 new board members to the chamber, and it was a really nice AGM, so congratulations to them. And we were really enjoyed the Nine and Dine they had for the first time at Comox Golf Course, and are encouraging them to do more chamber events at the golf course there. I just want to quickly welcome Kyle, the new operations manager, to Comox Golf. Councillor Haslett and I had a chance to just pop over there and meet their new operations and leadership team. And now that we have the 25-year lease signed, we'll just be looking at trying to cross promote and seeing what our kind of win-win priorities are for our 2 organizations. And just to pass along some good news, Rob Road Playground, I saw an email this week just from my family that attends there. They did get provincial funding to get them across the line for the inclusive playground. So I thought that was really great news. We were able to see them as a delegation, but didn't have funding for them. I did see that it's going across the line, and they will be starting construction on that inclusive playground, which I think will be the second in all of Comox Valley. So that was really nice to read that funding did get provided to their hard advocacy work there. That is all for the report. So there are no media questions. There are no public questions unless I can't see. And so I will move for adjournment at 7:58. And all those in favor? Perfect. And thank you so much to senior staff and for entertaining a special meeting soon. Have a great night. Drive safe.